stones, no broken promises, no busy tones. Just what it takes, just make believe. No one belongs to anything. I've seen the lies, I've seen the lies.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Live Live. I'm Lewis and Troy. This is our special Science Day from the Riverside Nature Center. Before we get started, I gotta pay the bills. There's so many great sponsors today. You get to visit Gibson's Discount Center where they
no holding back, no stepping stones, no broken promises, no busy tones. Just what it takes, just make believe. No one belongs to anything. I've seen the lies, I've seen the lies, I've seen the lies. Train go by, this kill or be killed. I wonder who lives. Too long to stay outside. Too long to be alone. Just let it go. Just let it go. Just let it go. Just let it go. For too long to stay outside.
There we are. Now we've got audio. Okay, all right. Whew. It's never ending. We've got everybody here. I think we've got everybody here.
Yeah, you're good.
How are you guys doing today? We got Kiley Miller here. Kylie, there he is. Good. And then Becky Etzler from the Riverside Nature Center. Becky, how are you?
I'm good. I'm real good.
And then Gilbert and Andrew are here to refute anything that is said today that doesn't make sense financially.
Well, I just want to say that birds are not real. So
Birds are.
Not real.
We're off to a good start already. I have to
We're
say,
here for support.
we're here for support.
Happy to be here.
Yes. Tell us a little bit, Becky. The Riverside Nature Center's history is a pretty good one. It's a grassroots effort. How did you get involved, and when did you arrive here?
Wow. Yeah, I'm going on 10 years now, believe it or not, here at the Nature Center. I was a mid-Atlantic girl who married a Texan. And so, if you do that, you end up in Texas at one point in your life. And so, husband retired, decided to come out to the hill country. And of course, we bought some property, and I brought, all my East Coast landscaping ideas with me, and tried to plant daffodils and azaleas.
Oh my.
And all of this. Had no idea, what I was doing, but quickly found out about wonderful organization, the Texas Master Naturalists. And so signed up, took some classes, learned all about land management here in the hill country, and was hooked. And so, a couple years went by working with them through their board and administration, worked with the Plant Society, and then this position became available. We all remember Mary Muse with the folk festivals.
Yeah.
She was my predecessor here.
Really?
And
I didn't realize that.
She and I were classmates in the Texas Master Naturalist class that year. And so she said, Becky, come apply. You need to be at the Nature Center.
Be here at this event.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And I did it on a whim.
Yeah.
They're not going to hire me.
Not going to hire you, right?
What do I know?
What do you know?
And well, I'm still wondering what do I know, but I'm faking it well, huh? No. But yeah, so that's sort of my story in a nutshell.
And the Nature Center is not just a this place for exhibits and displays. There's a garden here. It's what I view as like a critically important part of the future of Kerrville as far as the river trail complex goes.
Yeah.
I see it. It's a trailhead. It's a place for inspiration. It's a place for kind of reflection. We could have very easily done this outside today. It's so nice outside today
nice
too.
this
So,
morning,
what do you see the future of this event, of this facility, and this program?
Well, I've said it, and I've even said it on, I think the last time I was on the show. We're kind of tight, physically. Our space here is tight,
Right.
but it's a beautiful property. We're right here in the middle of downtown. There's something to say about having expanse and to be able to move out, and but then do you lose some of that cachet that you have with the local folks, because now they're going to have to drive a distance to get to you. So we're kind of at that crossroads. It's like, do we expand with a satellite? How do we go about doing that? And is that really our future? In order to grow some of our programs and things, of course, we need to grow our staff. One thing that COVID did teach us is that, a lot of people can work from home. And so, maybe that's what we need to do, because we certainly don't have the physical space to house, have administrative offices for, a staff of 15 or 20 or
Right.
what have you. But, so we definitely, creativity is going to be playing a big part of
Right.
how we expand in that fashion.
Programmatically, as far as science goes, what are some of the keys that you see as important for the future?
Well, it's always building that environmental consciousness. And so, true to my heart, and what we've been doing recently is working a lot with youth. We have great adult, continuing education, but it's getting the youth in our community and surrounding areas outside, that connection, with nature, so they can develop that consciousness. And,
Right.
and we're not asking everybody to, become, scientists, biologists, or, what have you, but to have a healthy respect and to be aware that we're all part of it. That I don't know if you've seen that image where you've got eco versus ego, and so if you can, everybody's kind of in this evolving web rather than human up here and then everything's dribbling down. I know we can kind of, that's a philosophical issue that can go in all different directions.
Right.
We can debate that, but if we can raise our youth, and that's, I think, what our mission is here, is to expand public education and starting with the kids.
Right.
And
I've said it. One of the best events that I've been to in Kerrville in recent years was our astronaut that was here recently.
Yeah, that was.
How did you get her again? Tell us her story.
Yeah, well, Lieutenant Commander Jessica Whitner, her parents live in Bandera.
Yeah.
And, the beauty of a small town, happened to have an associate that saw her parents in Medina at the library
Right.
talking about,
Yeah.
our daughter went through the space program and everything. So she contacted me and said, hey, you got to get in touch with, this mom and dad. And so I did, and said, hey, do you want to come, to Riverside and talk? And they said, no, nobody wants to listen to us. You need to get our daughter in. So, you can't contact them directly. You have to go through publicity, office and PR and all of this, with NASA. So this, started wheeling and dealing and getting all the paperwork done and everything. And we were very lucky that Jessica, was available and came, and she says, well, what do you want me to talk about?
Right.
I said, well, your experience. How did you get from, a young girl who liked to tinker with mechanics and things like that in California to, Johnson Space Center. And how did that happen? So she took us through her journey, and we had kind of, advertised it. It was for families. We had it on Saturday, and I was hoping that we would see, some young people in the audience, and especially young girls.
Yeah, I
And-
thought that
and we
was
did.
I thought that was the thing that was the most amazing about it, was that it was an inspirational story,
Yeah.
because this is a woman that failed 3 times to get into the program, to even get into the officer candidate school, not alone being an astronaut.
Yeah.
That was probably the last thing, on her mind at this point, just passing the math test, the ACT, to get into the then she went to, I mean, it was you're right, it was one of these things where there should have been every girl who had any kind of
Well, or
STEM,
boy, too. I mean, but-
STEM, because one of the, her story about her junior year of high school was particularly fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, she, was an athlete,
Yeah,
and just kind of,
I'm tired of getting straight A's.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, went into a different direction, and she got a B.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And it sunk her ability to get into the
it
academy,
did.
and
It did.
but what a story though, and that's the kind of programming I think that makes it. Now, the downside of this is you bring McAllister here, and he will scare the hell out of people with his Red Cross stories of weather.
Yeah.
We got a great show for you guys here today. I'm really happy about this. We haven't done a live remote in a bit, and it's good to be in a facility where we can kind of talk and stuff. But first, I got to go to these two, Andrew and Gilbert. They're very excited about being here. You guys, what's going on in the economy today? Tell us all.
Well, hold on. First off, I'm really excited to talk about science.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit of a science nerd. There was not a STEM program available at the college that I went to at Stephen F. Austin until after I left. So
Is that right? Really?
Yeah. So I studied accounting and business, and I can tell you if that STEM program was there when I was in college, my life probably would look totally different.
Yeah.
Because I was just using what I had access to, right? But
Right.
anyway, I've been able to go back and check it out. It's pretty cool. It's a really neat state-of-the-art building. So anyway, we're excited to be here to talk about science.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Science? I'm
Man.
not talking about science. I don't know nothing
Gilbert
about
might
science.
not be as excited as I am, but he might not share the same enthusiasm. But I'm excited to be here. So
Yeah.
as far as the economy goes, we got a big couple of weeks. We've been talking over the last week about the unemployment rate and the payroll numbers that came out last Friday. They were somewhat weaker than anticipated, which kind of plays into the narrative and the thinking that the Fed's probably going to cut interest rates in September, which is next week is their September meeting. We have inflation coming out this week, so this week's another biggie. Financial markets will be looking towards that to kind of get a read on the continuing cooling trend of inflation that's been happening. They want to see that continue. So the Fed's not really too focused about that on inflation right now. They kind of turned an eye towards the labor market and what's going on in the jobs market, because that is the other half of their dual mandate that they have to pay attention to. So that's really what's financial markets are kind of paying attention to. The last thing I would say is the stock market last week is it showed some weakness. It was the worst weekly performance since March of last year, I believe. So that is also in line with investors thinking that there's a bit of a slowdown, cracks forming in the labor market, slowdown in the overall economy. So that's really it. That's the synopsis of what's going on.
They've been waiting for this for they root for this almost every day. It's going to happen. It's going to break. The economy's going to crash. We're ready for it.
Well, there's two things I would add to that. Number one is, like Andrew was talking about, the volatility we had last week in the equity markets. It's interesting that we are having volatility on the downside when 2 weeks ago it was volatility on the upside. We've had this. We've returned to this period of volatility in the market, and I think that's going to be true over the next few weeks. There's just going to be more volatility. That's on the upside and on the downside, based on what's going on in the labor market, interest rate market. The other thing too last week that was really interesting, and this is really for people that nerd out on economics and finance, is we've been talking for the past year and a half about a yield inversion. Well, that inversion de-inverted last week, and what that means is that we've started to see a normalization in interest rates where the 2-year Treasury rate was lower than the 5-year rate, which was lower than the 10-year rate, which was lower than the 30-year rate. That's the way it's supposed to be, where you have the longer the period you go out, the higher the interest rate should be. We were, for the past year and a half, in a inversion period where shorter term rates were actually higher than longer term rates. That's not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to be that way. So we've had this period where now we're de-inverting, we're going back to a normal curve, which is kind of what we want. And what we've seen at the same time is a rally in bond prices. So whereas the equity markets, the stock market is getting the crapola beat out of it last week, we've had the bond market actually be very, very strong and do very well. So if you're an investor, if you do like what me and Andrew normally tell people is invest in a diversified portfolio where you have stocks and bonds. The stock side of your portfolio last week wasn't doing so great, but the bond side of your portfolio should be doing fantastic. And that's something to think about, because as interest rates go down, bond prices should go up, which means yields go down. And that's a really positive thing for bond investors, because if you were a bond investor the past year and a half, you were really behind the curve, because as rates were going up, your bond values were going down. That's starting to change. That's a good thing. Really what we're saying is, if you're diversified like you should be, you're still doing okay, because one side of your portfolio might be weak, but the other side's doing really, really well. So those are all things we're looking at over the next few weeks. I would just say that there's volatility, so be mindful of that. And in volatility, there's always opportunity.
All right.
And it is I would call it a science, as far as trying to figure out, if you're an investor, to try to figure out exactly what amount or like percentage to allocate to certain asset classes, whether it's stocks, bonds, cash, real estate. That's where we come in. So it's an art and a science from what we do, in the sense that we get to kind of do discovery with your personal situation, your financial situation, see what's going on there, family dynamics, all of that stuff, and put together some kind of proposal for you about how your investment should be allocated.
All right. Well, we'll get to more of that here in a minute. I got a couple of news and notes real quick before we get to our guest, Kiley Miller, and more with Becky Etzler here. Today's show, we'll have Kiley, who's from Schreiner University, Tara Bushnoe. She's going to talk about water. She's from UGRA. Chris Distel from Schreiner University as well. Bruce Barton, who's an amateur astronomer. And then we'll finish up with Mike Morris of the Kerr County AgriLife Extension Agent. He's a land management expert and talking about the influx of new landowners here and what to expect. This is kind of more of maybe a policy conversation than science. We'll talk about that too. If you are out and about today, observances for the Field of Honor, Riverside Park, that goes on until September 11th. It's 24 hours a day. Taps played every day at dusk. That's George Eichner playing that. It's a free event. Women's soccer today. Schreiner women playing 3 o'clock today against Our Lady of the Lake. If you need an outreach, if you're trying to get your joints replaced, back to life at hospice and at home care, they're having their support group today at 3:30 p.m. over at Peterson Health. Veterans Yoga at the Kerrville Elks Lodge. And then, of course, that's at 5:30 tonight with Rick Trzynski. And then bingo at American Legion Post 208. So let me just see if I have any other. I'm tracking a lawsuit involving a daycare center here in Kerrville, involving the Child Place, where they alleged a lawsuit that was filed late last month alleges that they were negligent in allowing a child to fall out of a high chair, injuring the child. The child suffered a broken clavicle, and apparently they never bothered to tell the mother that the kid fell out of the high chair. So they're being sued in the 216th District Court here in Kerrville. The part of this that came out was that the Department of Health and Human Services for the state of Texas, they regulate daycares, and they found that they had cited child place on 6 occasions going back to 2019 for negligent safety, including twice in March when this incident happened. So there you go. All right, Becky, just one more thing in case you guys care. The Commissioner's Court's meeting today. I'm sure there will be something stupid coming out of that. A lot of pseudoscience gets mentioned in there. The latest was that apparently, I didn't know this was going to take so long. Did you guys read this story last week? I wrote about it last week, but the Hill Country Youth Ranch, I'm sorry, not the Hill Country Youth Ranch, Hill Country Youth Event Center, apparently they signed a deal to serve Pepsi products. And a woman got up and spoke at the meeting, Commissioner's Court, August 26th, saying that that's a bad idea because Pepsi uses aborted fetuses in their products.
Well,
so,
of course they do. Everybody knows that.
I mean, I did not know that was a thing. I think this is the same woman that also put out the 5G conspiracy theories as well. Becky, you helped put this panel together today, though. What was your give us your kind of your aim on what you wanted to achieve here with all these great guests?
Well, I mean, you and I talked about doing something live here, live remote, and a science day. So it was like, well, if you're leaving it up to me, then I'm sticking with more or less environmental science. And so, and then Kiley, it was like, well, I want Kiley to come on because of talking about STEM and things. And again, that kind of feeds into my whole philosophy of, getting kids excited about science and such. So yeah, it was like, okay, well, we've got, let's talk about education. If we bring in, Chris Distel from Schreiner, I mean, we can talk ecology, we can talk biology, we can talk ornithology, herpetology. He's got all the ologies going on. And so, and then of course Tara, water, huge issue, and so let's talk with Tara about water, and then we've got dark skies, and what's going on in the space program right now. I mean, with SpaceX and everything else. I mean, let's bring in somebody. Bruce Barton is extremely knowledgeable, and so asked him to come along. And then, of course, you're talking about influx, of new landowners. So, AgriLife, our Kerr County AgriLife agent with Mike Morris, not only, policy, like you mentioned, but education. And that's a big part of what he's doing is, getting out there and talking to new landowners and, traditional landowners.
Right.
And let's talk about, regenerative, agriculture and sustainability issues and things like that. So kind of hitting all of the different, areas of, water, sky, soil, and then, everything in between.
Right.
So,
And
I hope I captured that.
Yeah, you did. Absolutely fantastic job. Kylie comes from, you're from the oil and gas world, right?
I sure am.
You grew up in the oil patch.
Pretty much.
And you found your way to Kerrville. And what's interesting is that Schreiner is really a liberal arts college, but I know you and Chris Distel and others are working hard to raise awareness about STEM. And your journey took you out of Kerrville and back east. And I always think it's interesting. You're the MIT guy, and you could have taken that route, but you came here. And tell me, why did you make the decision to come home to Kerrville?
Yeah, a couple of different things there. Certainly for myself, coming to Schreiner, I come from Midland, Texas, oil and gas country, and so that's whatever I saw people making money. And so that's what I really, that's how I wanted to explore it. My mom was administrative assistant in that area and kind of really explored that piece of it. As you mentioned, got an opportunity to come to Schreiner, got a chance to go away, got a chance to come back. And I really do think about it as a chance. And I think every time we're posed with a decision like that, we've got to take that chance and see what happens. And so really coming back for Schreiner, coming back to Kerrville and Schreiner for me was a labor of love. It was something that I really, Schreiner really provided a stepping stone for me. I had never dreamed about going to, or even considered about going to MIT when I was young. But as I became more and more involved in the kind of my studies, I said maybe it could be, and got an opportunity to do that. Worked a little bit in industry for a little bit, and got an opportunity to come back to Schreiner. And really, my position at Schreiner afforded me an opportunity to kind of show students about that I was in those seats. I wanted to create an impact for them, and that impact really is a springboard for them. Schreiner has an opportunity, as you mentioned, as a liberal arts institution, to provide a wide education for these students. And you can specialize in fields like finance and accounting and in environmental biology. And so that gives an opportunity for these students to really kind of branch themselves out in addition to things like history and psychology and English and communication studies, exercise science. It provides a wealth of opportunities, but really for me, that's really what it was about, was to show these students that you may come from meager beginnings, and Schreiner is a tiny school compared to some of the schools across the state and across the nation, but you can achieve big things, and the dreams that you really want to. I'd attempted to get into MIT 3 times, right? My 3rd time was the charm. Got an opportunity to pursue that and really wanted to hold and handle the rest of my opportunities that were available to me.
Right. And you come back and there's this emphasis now. I mean, I feel like even though your big boss will sit there and talk to you about bullfighting among women, which he's a fascinating storyteller. And he's a liberal arts guy, but he seems to be very supportive of science and engineering. What has it been like? I mean, how do you feel supported, and where is the future like for Schreiner in science?
Yeah, I think we've done, over the last, I would argue, 10, 12 years, we've really started to implement some unique strategies in that capacity, starting to expand some offerings there. For instance, engineering used to be a 3-2 program when I was a student there, and also now a beginning faculty member. And now we have transitioned to completely a full-on 4-year engineering program. And I think about STEM as science, technology, engineering, and math, and having a full-fledged program where students don't have to transfer to complete their credit in that degree, that's a huge deal.
Right.
In addition to that, we've also started an aviation program. And so I think from a support standpoint, the president, the institution, the infrastructure really is mindful about what are the opportunities that we can provide, both as an institution and also to our rural population, right? We recruit and educate a wide swath of the surrounding 6 counties of Kerrville. Right, of Kerr County, and I think that's a unique opportunity for us. We've leaned into that.
Yeah.
We have now students that are working for Southwest Research Institute, working for Johnson & Johnson. These are individuals that are making vaccines for like things like as problematic as something like cystic fibrosis.
Right.
Right, and so those are really exciting opportunities. And so these are all students that have a liberal arts education. They may not have a liberal arts degree, but they have a liberal arts education.
Right.
And I think that's really powerful from a university standpoint.
Do you feel like, this is more of a position piece and a policy piece, but there's a lot of discussion about where the U.S. sits as far as STEM, and are we in a good position? Are we in a bad position? How do you evaluate it?
Yeah, for me, I'm always of the opinion that, especially from a positive outlook standpoint, that there's always opportunity for improvement. I think certainly from a technology standpoint, we are still very well ahead. Now, if we think about it and we compare test scores or something to that capability, let's say for middle schoolers or high schoolers or something to that effect, and we look at that across the world, there's some differences between us and other countries, and I think a lot of that has to do with the education that goes in place both at in the United States as well as these other countries. But if you look at the infrastructure, the financial environments, the business environments, the markets that's associated with it, U.S. is still one of the highest GDP earners per capita,
right.
And that's outstanding. And so we've got to make sure to kind of recognize that fact that U.S. is still certainly leading in that capacity. There's always an opportunity for improvement. There's always an opportunity for areas, specifically areas of technology. I think about our guests here talking about the algorithms that are associated with making sure that these finances work right. Again, that all falls into these STEM fields. Mathematicians and quantum physicists were some of the first ones to resolve some of these algorithms that were plugging at these 15 different parameters problems that really is the finance.
Right. I mean, yeah, the finance world's got plenty of mathematicians in
Absolutely.
it. I mean, if Andrew had had a STEM background, he'd probably be on Wall Street.
Yes. What I was alluding to earlier was modern portfolio theory, which I'm sure you've heard of, which is one of the pioneering concepts of that. But
Yeah.
So
Hey, who's our best science investment in right now? What do you guys? We need a science tech. It's all tech though.
Well, no,
tech,
I mean,
but not necessarily like biotech. I mean,
Biotech,
there's a bunch of subsectors.
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what flavor you're looking for.
World's dumbest CEO's on track to becoming a trillionaire, by the way, just so you guys know. Kiley, you went to MIT to study what?
So I was studying at UT. I was studying analytical chemistry.
Okay.
And my research led me in a little bit different direction based on our research group. We were looking at recognizing polymer surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up studying bioengineering at MIT.
Okay.
And so I was the individual that was modifying DNA in bacteria and then also in viruses and then eventually yeast to actually recognize these surfaces. One of the products that we were looking to develop there were things like nerve guidance channels. This would, if someone had severed their arm or something like that and lost function in their hand, this type of technology would have allowed for nerve regrowth into their hand so they could actually retain function back in their hand. One of the other ideas that was associated with that is a water filtration system. If you can attach these small amino acid groups called peptides to any variety of things, you can clean water, right? And so you can create these filters that basically can scrub water. And so as water flows through, you can get it to attach to certain particles or contaminants. But the unique thing about that technology is we can turn it off as well. And so you could hit a switch on the back end of that valve and then regenerate that filter. And so again, some unique capabilities out there for some of that work.
Now, and because I'm snarky and a jerk sometimes, so I can always say like so it's your fault that we had COVID then, right? You created it in the lab,
along with the rest of the population that propagated it.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for participating. What's the you get a kid that comes in maybe not sure. I mean, usually when you come to college, there's always those kids who not sure.
Yeah.
What do they? How do you address those kids? How do you make them? How do you reach them?
That's a great question. So at Schreiner, one of the unique things about the faculty and also quite a few of the staff at Schreiner is we're faculty mentors. And what that means is we advise the students on both the academic coursework as well as kind of what they want to do later on in life. I can give you one great example. I had a student. This was a student. She was committed to be a doctor. She wanted to study biochemistry, right? It was all of the things. It's everything she wanted to do from a childhood. We're progressing through her coursework, and she is starting to dabble a little bit in some of this other classwork. And she took a theater class. And that theater class, it really opened up something different in her. She ended up finishing, interestingly enough, in English nonetheless, but with a minor in biochemistry.
Wow!
And so this is an individual that now works in the writing industry as a science journalist.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can imagine just the background that is associated with that. We have another individual that ended up started out in chemistry, ended up going communication studies. And he is now a publisher for one of the science journals. He takes the cover images and puts all of that framework together. So it's really amazing.
That's an important part of it too. We've had those conversations, about developing, sort of rural journalism programs, and that was one that stood out in my mind was that, we need to understand science better from a journalism standpoint as well. So the writing of it is critical, because you don't want me writing about it, because I'll get upset about the geologists.
Yeah, but I certainly think that we allow them to explore that piece of it. I think that's what's beneficial about a liberal arts education, is that they do get an opportunity to explore a wide variety of coursework throughout their experiences. And that may allow them to at least maybe explore a minor in that capacity, or also completely change their minds. Sometimes a lot of time, they walk in with an idea, and we coach them through the decision that they want to make. It's certainly not about us, and it's not about pushing them to our degree plan or our major or our program. It is much more about that individual, and that's what I tell students. I think Dr. Distel will reverberate that, is when you find a passion for something, that's when you want to pursue it. That's when you find the love and it's not work anymore, that you found it.
One of the unfortunate things that happened from COVID was that we saw a lot of anti-science come out. How do you deal with that? How do you address that?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot more of that has to do with getting out and having conversations with people, and really just providing evidence. And again, that evidence is out there, and we can provide documentation for that. We can have conversations with people, and I really do think that's what it's about. I have elderly parents, and having conversations with them about what our world is going to be like in the next couple of years, and what it has been like, is certainly important from my own personal perspective, but also getting out in the community and having those conversations about education. Really is. And it's about informing the public about really what science does, what can we actually evaluate, and then what can we not evaluate.
When you say that your parents are elderly and you're explaining to them how the world will look, does it mean they're like jacked into like Fox News and you gotta like deprogram them?
No, not at all. Not at all. Again, not at all. Again, we
I know people who have those children.
We see a lot of that. That's where my mind went.
That's the beauty of it. Is we want people to make informed decisions. It really is. And so the more information that we can provide for them, the more informed decisions they can make. And that's the power, I think, of information. That's why the internet is such an amazing tool. That's why we consider all of the media outlets now as additional resources. I mean, you think about it, 20 years ago, how many media outlets were there? Right, compared to there are now. Right, and so there's so many more voices. Right, and so how can you focus in on the voices that make a difference for you and provide that information?
The challenge, the challenge,
critical thinking.
I
mean, that's where it's at.
The challenge I find is helping people distill the nonsense, which there's so much of it out there. And it's it's in chunks. You see a lot of things like. I was going through, in preparation for this, I was looking at all the pseudoscience stuff out there, and it's just a long, long list of what people believe. And even myself, I'm like, I believe in that. I think that's true. I didn't realize it was pseudoscience. But I mean, objectively looking at this, though, you guys have a tough job, though. I mean, keeping kids interested in this as well, because it's not like it's hard work. Do you get kids that come in and are like, and you say, "Oh, I want to be a doctor, a PhD," and do they have an idea, or do you have to kind of let them know here's what's going to happen?
Yes, to all of that, absolutely. Some individuals may come from a background where they have had some experiences in education, whereas at Schreiner, one of the things that we value ourselves in is our ability to take those individuals that are first generation and that they don't have that collegiate background, they don't have that educational background, and really kind of coach them through that experience. And so I'm talking them through this is the requirements for them, but also too, not just throwing it out there to them, but also creating stepping stones for those individuals to reach the outcomes that they want. Right. These are the kind of preliminary objectives. I also coach on the side here at local soccer club. And it's a scaffolding model that we use in this coaching system. It's called a progression. And I think about it from an educational perspective. It's just a progression. It's a progression of where you started, and some individuals start in different places. And so, but getting them to where they want to be, it really is that stepping stone
Right.
for them to move on to the things that they want to achieve.
Do you have some scientific insights on how to fix the U.S. men's national team? Is that-
I'm sure, why not?
That's
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A little more time, a little more chemistry. I think more than anything, it's about finding the right personnel. I think I've watched plenty of soccer over my period of time of playing and coaching and refereeing, that it has everything to do with the right combination of individuals.
Right.
In the dugout is what it amounts to.
There is going to be more investment in Schreiner's STEM programs. What does that future look like? You know, what programs are you going to add? I mean, I know you have some little pet projects you do too, like with beer and some other things too. What else are you guys working on?
So some of the neat things that we're working on recently here are certainly adding these support fields to technology. And so we're really excited about kind of revamping our computer science or information systems, networking capabilities. We know that the world really does now run on this type of technology.
Yeah.
What we're streaming out right now, right, is part of that process. And so really trying to ramp those opportunities up. That right now that falls underneath our area of business, and so it's kind of unique in that capacity. But that's something else that's beautiful about Schreiner is that we've got STEM across all of these different divisions.
Right.
And so I think that and the allied health fields that support the medical field are going to be important areas of, especially here in the Hill Country, with the population that we have and that we serve.
Right.
Those are the areas of pursuit.
All the elderly people jacked into Fox News as much as possible.
Yeah.
What is the most exciting thing you're seeing in the science world right now?
There are some really, really unique growth opportunities, I think, in textiles. And the reason why I say that is we've used a whole lot of fossil fuels to generate plastic material. Maybe that's for clothes, maybe that's for containers, maybe that's for these other capabilities. They're now starting to discover that there are some biological organisms, some of them being plants, some of them being small bacteria, that have the ability to be modified, bioengineered, to consume and break these materials down. And I think one of the biggest things that we find now are the incorporation of microplastics. Y'all have probably seen it all over the news. And so looking at that, trying to find organisms and plant life that can actually break that material down at a faster rate than it currently breaks down in the environment, I think that's probably one of the most exciting things that will happen probably within the next 5-10 years.
Right.
Is we'll start to see some of that come into market and then potentially be used possibly in the oceans first because of the impact there, and because of our access to water.
Yeah.
I think in the soils and in the air that will eventually come later.
Because the concerns about microplastics now are becoming more and more, there's more and more evidence that suggests that they're in your brain and your blood, and so they're all over the place, and people aren't realizing this as well. Although I'm sure there's already like significant pushback, against that kind of science already. So good stuff. Kiley Miller, thank you for joining us this
Absolutely.
morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you. All
Yeah.
right, yeah. Next up, Tara Bushnoe is going to join us here. She's got. We have. Give her your microphone.
Do you want us to move so you can have more guests
Yeah, I
on?
guess you guys can go if you need to.
Thank you for allowing us.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for letting us come.
I just like having you guys sit here and look official.
Well,
All friends
I know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We like supporting you. So.
All right.
Hello,
Thanks,
bye-bye.
guys. You guys want to go? You guys can.
Make sure you talk about the topographical map. I mean the map outside.
Oh, the river
Yes.
Oh.
I'm like such a big fan about that. Make sure you cover that.
I don't know. You ask the question. Andrew Gay's got a question for Tara and Becky.
By the way, are we going to leave?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, before we go, I wanted to make sure that you had enough support for the Starlink terminal.
I do.
Trying to buy for the.
Your help helped.
Yes, thank you. Good.
Thank you.
I want
Yes.
you to know we contributed. And
Yes, I appreciate that very much. I did obtain it. I
Excellent.
had to bite my tongue on the dumbest CEO in America.
I was gonna make like a swear jar. We were
Yeah.
gonna make a jar for Lewis every time he talks about it bashes Elon Musk. He has to
Yeah.
put like $1 in the jar, and it would go
Yeah.
to fund a Starlink terminal.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Well, listen, if that isn't science, technology, engineering, and math in motion, I don't know what else is.
I don't know. We'll see it. We'll see if it works. I just got an email from yesterday that it's shipping today. So
Excellent.
we'll see if it works for the things I want to do to cover a holiday parade. I gotta bite the bullet on dude. So anyway,
Well, it's a worthy project, and I was happy to support it.
I
and
appreciate it very
hope
much.
that it works out very, very well.
I think we've raised enough to do it. Now I have enough money to pay Leslie to talk. So
I think she'll do that for free.
I know. All right, guys. Thanks
Okay,
a lot.
I'll throw you a softball real quick.
Yeah.
The map. So in leadership, I talk about it on the show all the time that I'm involved with leadership Kerr County. But one of my favorite days during, I guess, our science day.
It's an
Environmental day. Yes.
Come on, Andrew.
What's science, environmental? Okay.
It's the same
So there is to scale a topographical map of Kerr County that UGRA has, but I think it lives here, right?
It belongs to Riverside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it does.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, well. Okay.
They raised money. We've probably had it 12 years maybe now,
probably. Yeah.
and they raised money to purchase it. So it is a topographically accurate model of the Guadalupe River Basin. So more than just Kerr County.
Oh, okay.
So we use it as a tool to talk with groups of all ages, from little kids, obviously through leadership. Talk about just geography. Where do we fit within this larger Guadalupe River Basin? What is a river basin? What is a watershed? How the shape of the land influences what activities can have the biggest impact on the river, how we, even just why we're a flash flood prone region.
Yes.
You can see the steepness of the land on that model. And that really comes to life with something like the flood that happened July 23rd this year, where people were like, I've never seen the river come up that fast, and then it goes down really fast.
Yeah. And I think that, for purposes of this show, you guys talked a lot about educating kids, all right? But I think I was thinking about how I've been educated through this center as an adult and through UGRA and leaderships, like some of the community programs and stuff. And so I think continuous learning and education for adults and access to that education in our local community is extremely important too. So both of you guys are in on that.
Well,
so
thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
You are definitely a lifelong learner, and so glad to have you work with us at UGRA and y'all had a team for the river cleanup too?
We did.
Yeah, we did. Thank you. I was going to mention that before we left. Yeah, so this last weekend, surprisingly, the section that we were cleaning up was right at the end of Camp Meeting Creek. So I make sure I tell everybody what a watershed is if they don't know what that is. And I'm like, so this is the one that goes to River Hill and it dumps into the Guadalupe River. So we cleaned up right along that area. But the flood seemingly washed out a lot of stuff. So we had maybe one full bag of some bottles and cans, but no.
Maybe some small stuff more than big things. Yeah, and that can be variable. Some creeks, that mouth of the creek really got loaded with debris and other things with the flood, and then some got washed out. So yeah, it's hard to predict.
We didn't have any tires or electrical appliances this year. We didn't have, we did find some roofing shingles.
Okay.
A really big pile that's back in the woods that we couldn't get. But
I don't think that came from the flooding or
that's
the river. I
probably
think that
not.
was
No, it looked
intentional
like somebody
human.
dumped in there. But
That's
it was
true.
good. It
Yeah.
was fun. We always enjoyed doing that.
Yeah,
Glad
and
to
y'all have
contribute.
been doing that site for years too, which I think is great. Then you can have that kind of perspective about what it looks like.
Yeah, and I personally, because that's at the, in our neighborhood of where I live, so I run and bike there all the time. So going there to clean it up and pick up the trash in an area that I frequent, for something like the river trail that we have in our community, it's a great.
That is a good segue too, because that's really, we're UGRA. We're not we don't participate in research science, and we're not the big brains like Dr. Miller and Dr. Distel. But what we try to do is bring the science and how our impact can improve the environment to the people that live in our community.
Right.
So when we ask people what site they'd like to clean up for the river cleanup, for example, we usually start with, where do you live? because I feel like that gives people a much closer connection if they can clean up in their backyard or a creek that they drive past every day, and then that just reinforces, start to think about what other things could be influencing that waterway.
Yeah, well, that worked on me.
Worked.
So,
Check. Our job
All right, guys.
is done.
All right, good job.
Take care.
yes, take care.
You can come, Chris. You can come join us too. By the way, Tara Bushnoe's here from. How did the most irritating day of the year turn out? Which is to me. Oh, thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. My day. I always find it. Come on, Chris. Come on, have a seat with these folks. Because it's like every year we still have to deal with the fact that people are dumping stuff in the river. It's ridiculous.
It turned out well, and I saw you thank you for coming. I saw you briefly during the raffle section.
Yeah, I was trying to do 2 events at once and
well,
didn't quite work out. So.
You know, we have always for years had the river cleanup the 4th Saturday in July, and we do get a lot of feedback from people like, oh, it's just too hot. It's too hot to do it in July, and we really say we get great participation then because we don't have conflicts with school and other activities, which is but this year we had to reschedule. Luckily it was because of a lot of rain, which we needed, and so we gave it a try in September, and we still had great participation at about 373 participants on that day.
Fantastic.
Yes, but probably about 150 less than we would have had if we had it in July, because we had the wonderful events over at the River Star Park for the veterans, and then I know that there was a lot of other things going on in the community as well. So you get a little.
Still a great turnout, though. I got there for the raffle. I mean, there was a couple hundred people there.
And there was more people than that cleaned up. So some folks came, and my family did this. They came and they cleaned their site. They dropped off their trash, and then they went to soccer. So they missed the raffle and everything.
Yeah, you're in the full tale of youth sports too.
Yes.
So.
Yes. But overall, we had 5,215 pounds of trash.
5,215 pounds.
And talking about tires, 43 tires.
Wow.
So we estimate the weight of the tires. We just have a set amount of pounds that we estimate, and then multiply that by the tires, number of tires, and add it to the total.
2 tons.
43 tires, and those ranged from, we had a tractor tire, and then lots of, smaller vehicle tires too. But the majority of those came from a place down almost to the county line towards Comfort, that it was a riverfront area that group had cleaned up last summer for the river cleanup. But when the flood came through, I don't know whose upstream property it was that had a whole bunch of tires that washed them onto their property.
Yeah.
Just this year, all of
Just this year, yes. Wow. Within the last year, but most likely all in July, because we hadn't had a rise in the river before then. Yeah.
Tara, you're the head of UGRA, and it's probably one of the most important, most visible public agencies here from the education perspective. But give us a rundown of what UGRA does.
So we are a local government entity. We're created by the state, by the legislature, but our jurisdiction is just Kerr County. So I love that because we really get to concentrate on our community and be more of a local
Somebody gave us some money and it blew my ears out. I'm sorry.
It wasn't that loud for us, but
it was like, oh my gosh.
So we have a couple of different roles. Primarily, it's to be a voice for Kerr County when we participate in regional water planning or flood planning initiatives. Also to have routine water quality monitoring, and then education as well, and really overall to be a steward of the Upper Guadalupe River and to help the community participate in that too.
One of the things I think is interesting about, we have a lot of debate about water and what UGRA is. UGRA is not a regulatory body, right?
Correct.
But you do help with mitigation on water quality. Is that right? Or with some things like
sure. So
feral hogs and all that kind of nonsense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So water quality, though, as well, in that we collect data for the state through the Clean Rivers program. So that's our main water quality program that we submit data to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, which is the state agency that is our primary environmental agency. And they use that to assess water bodies all throughout the state. So we don't have primary research projects per se, but we collect that data in a quality controlled manner so that it can be used by the state to make those assessments.
Right.
But then we have incentive programs, like you mentioned, to help people, give a little bit more encouragement to have those practices that will benefit the watershed. So feral hogs is one that we concentrate on because they like to wallow in water because they don't sweat. So they need to cool themselves off by wallowing in the water, and that often results in digging up the riparian areas, which are sensitive areas along the river.
Yeah.
And then their waste, just by pooping in the river,
Which is significant.
yeah, that can elevate nutrient levels and bacterial levels. So it can degrade conditions for recreation, and then also create side effects like algae blooms, for example, by overabundant nutrients. So with Kerr County, we fund a bounty. It's $12 per feral hog tail that you freeze them and then take them to Animal Services over on the Loop, and they have an affidavit form that you complete, turn it in, and the county sends you a check for $12 per tail.
So if you knock out one, you cut its tail off, you freeze it, and you bring it there, you get $12.
You don't get $12 that day,
But eventually.
you will get it. Yes, you'll
Yes.
get a check for $12.
Wow.
Yes. And then some of our other incentive, rainwater harvesting has really been an area that
Yeah.
I feel like we've had a great impact and have had really successful programs. So we have two. Our rebate program has been doing wonderful. Yeah, it's really, and we've, as we've seen success, have been able to expand it over the years. So it's been going on since 2011, and we started off with a $50 rebate. So it was always 50% of what you spent on equipment up to a certain amount. And so it started at 50, and we increased it over the years, and now we're at 500. So that helps a little bit more. I mean, if someone's going to construct a whole house rainwater harvesting system, I mean, it's $30,000 plus. But if you're going to maybe start with a 5,000 gallon system or something for irrigation, that 500 can be a nice coupon in a way, a nice rebate on it. And so this year we had to increase our budget a couple of times. I think we funded about $18,000 worth of rebates this year. And then our other program for rainwater, which I would love to see more participation in, is our large grant program. So that can be up to $15,000, and nonprofits, schools, public entities are eligible. So basically anybody but a private business or private homeowner.
Right.
And so you can apply for UGRA to fund 75% of your cost up to $15,000.
Wow. There's a lot of perceptions out there about rainwater harvesting, and I see that in some places regulations have been loosened. There's some places, my former home state, where for a while there you couldn't rainwater harvest because that water was spoken for.
And Colorado is one state that is really still has those regulations in place, that the water is the water of the state. It's going to fall off your property and go into a waterway, and then should be managed by the state. So they don't allow rainwater harvesting. As far as I know, that's the only state that has a really strict restriction. Texas has done some things to encourage it. So your purchase of a rainwater harvesting, a tank in particular, is tax exempt.
Right.
So you as the purchaser kind of have to know that, because not all vendors do. But that should be a tax exempt purchase for rainwater harvesting. And then there's also a law passed through the legislature that prohibits homeowners associations from prohibiting rainwater catchment systems.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, because some of them probably don't like the way they look, or God forbid.
I believe the homeowner, I'm not 100% sure on this, I believe the homeowners association might still be able to require like screening of some sort, but cannot outlaw the
Just
tank.
not ban it from because it doesn't look nice. Interesting. There's a lot of confusion too about water, surface water, groundwater.
Yeah.
I heard that, and I don't know if you sent it to us or not, but I heard one of your people did write an article kind of explaining the difference of this.
Of how it's managed in the state.
Yeah.
So it is, annoyingly confusing. I agree.
Yeah.
At the state is in charge, for lack of a better word, regulates surface water. So anytime you're going to put in a dam and impound surface water, if you're going to take surface water out of a river or creek, those are all through the water permit process that the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality regulates. And they also regulate pollution into surface water. And then, but groundwater is at the local level. So we do have a state agency, the Texas Water Development Board, that has more of a role in groundwater, but they're not the primary regulatory entity. We have groundwater conservation districts, or GCDs, throughout Texas. Ours in Kerr County is Headwaters Groundwater Conservation District, and they are just one county. And Bandera has a one county GCD as well. A lot of them in this area are just, are coterminous with the county boundary. But in other parts of the state, it could be a couple of counties. So what our groundwater district does is permits commercial wells. So if you have a well that you're pumping for irrigation, for mining, for municipal use, you have to get a permit from them, and you have an annual amount that you can pump. But then a private well, like that you have at your home, and I'm not sure since when, but it's been at least 15 years or more, those have to be registered so that they know where they are, and they have a well log that shows the depth. But the homeowner is responsible for being conservative of that resource.
Do you think that homeowners, do you think there's some number of homeowners that just don't even bother? Is that an issue, you think, here? You know, they're like, I'm just going to dig. Well, I don't need to be told what to do. This is my property.
Oh, well, I would say not that often, because the driller, I mean, it's very specialized equipment.
The driller has to,
the driller is licensed by the state of Texas, and if they're found to have drilled a well illegally, that's their livelihood. So.
Yeah. Interesting. The other thing that UGRA does is, like, your education efforts are incredible. You have one of the more beautiful sort of demonstration gardens out there.
Nice.
I drive by it all the time. I'm always amazed by it. So tell us a little bit about your efforts to educate people on water conservation and water use.
As far as our Eduscape, that's what we call our educational, our landscape around our building. Is meant to be a place where you could come and learn about different native plants, to kind of see what a native plant garden looks like and how it changes from year to year. Like we have wanted to do some plantings to increase the variety of plants that we have, but we haven't done it the last few summers because it's been a drought. And so you can see that what plants are doing really well in the drought conditions. So part of it is, and I will say the first maybe 2 to 3 years that we had that landscape, we had to water it just as much as a traditional landscape. But now that it's established, I think since September of 2023, so an entire year now, we probably ran our irrigation system twice.
Wow.
And it's all rainwater. We have a 30,000 gallon tank there. So now that it's established, we haven't needed to. We've done some hand watering for trees that we planted, but so for water conservation, it's a demonstration for that, but also for reducing stormwater runoff. So when it rains, and we all saw this with the flood very dramatically, that water will go across the land and goes right to the lowest point in elevation, which is your creeks and the river.
Yeah.
And it can pick up contaminants along the way, trash, oil and other things from our cars, improperly operating sewer systems or septic systems,
Fertilizer,
all of those
Yeah.
things on the surface, and bring them into the waterways. So if you think about the area around your house, about holding on to that water by anywhere you have a slope, creating a terrace so that it's a flat area where the water can soak in, maybe having a rain garden, that's a resource and we don't get it very often. So how can you manipulate or construct areas within your property to hold on to water when it rains,
Right.
so that it doesn't run off? So those are the two main things that landscape demonstrates.
The the runoff from this last big storm that we had, I mean, that did cause some significant levels of pollution, right? That's one of the reasons why you postponed
Yes.
the original river cleanup.
So we did, and I didn't bring those specific numbers with me, but I'm happy to share them with you, so you have them for a later date. We did a little bit of an experiment, and it wasn't a rigorous sampling design, so I won't say that these values were, the absolute truth, but we went out as soon as it stopped raining and the water in Louise Hayes Park stopped rising. We sent out Travis, who works with us, and he started taking water quality samples. So we took a couple bacteria samples that first day, and then because that was a Tuesday, and then we took a couple a day through Friday. So those initial samples, the levels of bacteria were orders of magnitude higher than what you would want to have in swimming. But then by Saturday, they were close. They were still elevated a little bit, but they were close to that recreation standard. But because the water was really stained, like a dark, and it still is.
Yeah.
And that's from a lot of the organic material. And Chris, I don't know, maybe you have a different theory about it too, but organic material getting washed into the waterways and starting to break down, so the tannins or the different compounds that are in those leaves and the wood kind of stain the water. And since we hadn't had that happen in so long, it made more of a dramatic impact on the color of the river. But right after the flood, that was a factor, but also just the sediments in the water. So you might be walking and you can't see where your foot is. And so that's really concerning to us, that we would have had volunteers that could have gotten tangled up in some trash.
Well, one of the amazing, visuals that we saw was Johnson Creek, through Ingram, which was just ripping. I'm not sure how high it was at one point. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was terrifying, so.
And that was the watershed that got the most rain, for sure.
Yeah, 6 inches like in a very short period of time, yeah.
And really so Mountain Home is the top of the Johnson Creek watershed, and from there all the way to Ingram was really intense rainfall. The South Fork, so you think going out towards Criders, they didn't really get that much of a rise in the river out there. It was the Johnson Creek primarily, and a little bit the North Fork. Yeah. So we've talked to some people about it rained in July and the river flooded, and then we had like 6 inches of rain over a week, about 10 days ago, but the river really didn't come up at all. And so it matters how quickly it rains and where it rains.
Right.
And also the soils were rock hard and they couldn't absorb anything when it flooded. And so that kind of primed them a bit, so they could absorb more water on these last couple of rains. And then obviously it rained much more slowly.
Is it true that you have a little clubhouse over there at UGRA where you house all those ancient geologists? Is that where do they have like a little room over all those guys?
We are the landlords, for lack of a better word, of our building, and we do rent to different groups. And so Headwaters rents their office space, and then an additional office for the geology folks.
And those guys are volunteers, right?
That's my understanding.
They don't have anything to do with Headwaters, right?
They're not staff. Yeah. No, I think I don't know how Headwaters uses the research that they develop.
They probably don't, but
you can ask them.
Yeah.
But we are just their landlords.
I was amazed. I saw those guys in there one day at a Headwaters meeting, and I thought, why don't they just drag these guys out and tell them what's up?
We've had them speak to our board before.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they are a wonderful wealth of knowledge. So if you want to talk to them, I'd say just call Headwaters and see how you
I don't want to talk to those guys. Geologists are creepy. They are creepy people. I'm telling you.
Can I tell you about an upcoming event?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we try to do one educational seminar a year, and the upcoming one that we have is on September 20th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Hill Country Youth Event Center, and it's called the Lone Star Healthy Streams program.
Oh, really? Okay.
So it's a Texas AgriLife Extension Service program that's done in different parts of the state, and so we have invited them to come here, and we can add some of our own local content to it as well. But primarily it's going to talk about feral hogs. So we're going to have a hog trap set up on the dirt floor arena section at the Youth Event Center to demo, and then also watershed stewardship, small acreage conservation, so folks that have 5 acres, 10 acre, and want some strategies about how to manage that land, and then also weed management too. And so it's free to attend. You register through our website so that we can get a good count for lunch. Lunch is provided by the Kerr County Farm Bureau.
Wow.
And we're also in the classroom area, so our seating is going to be limited.
Nice.
So register. We'd love to see it. Oh, wonderful.
I saw a horrifying video the other day. It was it was one of those Facebook reels, and it was horrifying from the standpoint of somebody had brought a warthog into Texas.
Oh.
And I'm like, really? Is it necessary for you to bring a warthog here? We don't need Pumbaa breeding, I mean,
I'm sure it's not the only one.
I know. Don't you ever get terrified, what is out there? I mean, because there's so many
exotic species.
Species, yeah.
I mean, certainly because we have prolific axis deer population in black buck, we do know that they can escape and have established population, but not so much. So, those are money. You know, those folks that are bringing them in for their business, it's in their best interest to have a high fence, to have it be secure. Because they don't want, those are thousands and thousands of dollars, those animals, so keeping them on their property. So I would say they do a lot to avoid them escaping. But axis and black buck are probably the two, and maybe fallow deer.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating because when you drive by those game places and you see the critters they've brought in, have like gnawed down every bit of grass.
Oh, sure.
Like I can't imagine that being very good for the environment.
No, and that's something that we hear a frustration from a lot of people is if they're the neighbor of someone who is overstocked with whatever they have, whether it's traditional livestock or exotic species, where they have eaten every scrap of vegetation on there.
Yeah.
And now you have just dirt that is primed it's getting baked by the sun, so the good microorganism community in the soil is totally getting cooked as well, and it's going to take a lot longer. It's going to take a lot more than rain to get that land rejuvenated so it can regrow.
Yeah.
Right. So rain comes through, washes that soil off into our waterways. But how you manage your land on your private property is your business.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Even if you have a Komodo
Education.
dragon breeding farm, I mean, that would be like
Even if you have
a Komodo dragon breeding farm. You know, let them loose. They take care of some of those black buck. That's for sure.
They'd be happy with a small antelope.
They would.
Yeah,
be.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they would.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Great stuff from UGRA as always, and always present in the community too. You'll see them everywhere. One last question: the new Guadalupe River Center, which you guys are going to be a part of as well, that's coming. What's going to be UGRA's role in that facility?
Well, we're in the process of purchasing some land adjacent to it, so we don't have a financial interest at all in the River Center, but we like that property because it has a great riparian area and it's long and skinny, so that's what we like. We don't want to build anything, but we want to have a great demonstration area to show vegetation management, healthy riparian areas, targeted access points.
Right.
And then having the River Center nearby gives parking, and through their programming we can kind of piggyback off each other and have a place where we're not just so isolated that people have to come to us individually, but I think that there'll be a lot of synergy between the two locations, as well as what is going to be developed at Granger McDonald Park too.
Right. Great stuff as always. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it, Tara.
Thanks for having me.
Now with Chris Distel, when we saw Chris Distel a few months ago, he was over at Hal Peterson Middle School, and you were like a popular guy. Kiley was making weird chemical stuff, and you had critters.
You had animals.
Yeah, snakes bring the kids out.
Yeah, right. You brought the kids out and
a shed.
That was wild.
Yeah,
we
right
did
there.
not plan that.
You
And I
scared
never had
they scared its skin off.
They did. It shed right there for the audience.
how long have you been at Schreiner University?
This is my 15th year.
15th year. Wow. What brought you to Schreiner? What was the attraction to the job?
Schreiner at that time was promoting 3 new programs that they were calling signature programs, and one of those had to do with field biology. So there's a brand new position in the faculty, and the administration at the time saw a great opportunity in the wealth of environmental beauty that we have here, the connections to the land that so many property owners in this area have, and said, why don't we try to build a program around field biology? And so I interviewed for that job, and I was the least bad candidate. I was very happy to be able to take that position. And very quickly, actually, we got 2 opportunities that hadn't been planned in 2010 when I came on board. One was a adjacent parcel of land to Schreiner across East Main Street that became available for a much lower price than we had originally heard. And so Schreiner bought that land, which is now called the Hill at Schreiner. So if you drive down East Main Street, you may see the vineyard there. That's about a little over 30 acres. And then shortly after, a good friend of the university, Dennis Loftus, died, and in his estate had left some money for Schreiner to develop an observatory, because he was very into astronomy, to build an observatory, and then whatever money was left over from his donation used for the natural sciences, however Schreiner saw fit. So I was a pretty early career faculty member when my vice president, who's now president, Charlie McCormick, said, Chris, we have an opportunity with a bunch of money, can you develop it? And this is a really rare opportunity. And I said, I'd love to try. So talked with some folks about architecture, which I had no experience in, and planning and sort of thinking about the dream needs from the science perspective and the practical needs from the building perspective. And we worked out a great opportunity that really commingles the best parts of astronomy and field biology for our biological field station. And so we use that property, and we also have a property across Memorial Boulevard, kind of between Memorial and the river, that is part of our field station as well. So all that is to say, very early on, we built a field biology program and got a great resource to explore. Most schools, there's only about 25 field stations in Texas.
Wow.
And most of those you've got to drive a great distance to get to. Ours is right across the street. It's a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah.
Nice. And of course, the observatory is where you house Kim Arviston, right?
That's right.
You
We
sequester
keep him
him.
there.
You lock
He's
him
in
in
a locker
there.
when we have star parties. We just open that and say it's
Yes.
time.
Come on out, because he's probably one of the funniest people, and he doesn't maybe know that he's funny, but he's probably one of the funniest.
Kim's
funny-
great. We love Kim.
He's pretty good.
Yeah.
Tell us your background in science. How did you get started, and what was your educational background?
I've been interested in nature my whole life. My dad used to talk about me as kind of a weirdo because I had decided early on that I wanted to do something with nature, and I stuck with it, unlike most people.
Yeah.
So I was 100% sure I was going to be a marine biologist and study sharks for,
Oh, really?
for the vast majority of junior high and high school and
Yeah.
into college. And then I got on a boat and found out I get seasick pretty easily. So that didn't work out.
Yeah, right.
So I switched to freshwater stuff and had great opportunities through college to study some amphibians and reptiles and a few other things. And
Yeah.
I went on to get my master's degree in working in turtles. And,
Turtles.
Yeah.
Okay.
With turtles, not
With
me.
turtles. Okay. All right.
I tell my students often, when they kind of talk about what kind of credentials you have, my first publication was the first documentation of turtle flatulence.
Oh my gosh.
That's my breaking publication. And then
You wouldn't think of them as being flatulent, but I guess they probably would be, wouldn't they?
stands to reason.
Yeah. Right.
But anyway, nobody had documented it before, and so that was an exciting natural history now.
It-
And then I went on to actually I did 2 years of work in cancer research.
Oh, wow.
At the Cleveland Clinic, because I didn't think I was going to go on to teach. Wonderful experience there. Realized that cancer research is not my calling, but it's noble work. Got a lot of great experience with experimental design. Went back to get a PhD working with amphibians and agrochemicals and the effects of insecticides on food webs and things like that
on amphibians, yeah.
with amphibians.
Yeah. Interesting. I have to say that I had to unfortunately use some insecticides on a very aggressive wasp colony that was in my porch light.
Mm-hmm.
And I sprayed it, and they were in there. And then, like 2 days later, there was a gecko like running around in the I'm like, oh my God, I hope he survived that. He wasn't in there when that happened, you know. So
That's interesting.
Yeah. The hill country, though, is biologically one of the more interesting places.
It really is.
And you know, one of the things we could have talked about with Tara a little bit was that, you know, this is the environment here is sort of the reason why we have so much cedar is, I guess, related to maybe overgrazing and some other things that happened during the wool industry's heyday here. But what do you find interesting about this area from a research perspective or from a teaching perspective?
From a teaching perspective, we can get outside. I mean, I love taking my students outside as many opportunities as we can. So we have such a great resource here in Kerrville, in that the river is right nearby, and it's a beautiful, accessible river. We've got a creek right on campus that we can get in and really explore in, but lots of terrestrial habitats as well. And, even within a half-hour drive, we can get to all kinds of places. We've got great friends in the Hill Country. Riverside Nature Center's hosted our classes. Fisheries Science Center with Texas Parks and Wildlife, USDA, Upper Guadalupe River Authority has met us out at the river and done work with mussels and clams and things. So it's a wonderful spot to be from the teaching perspective because we can get out and the weather's good enough of the year. I came from Ohio. We had a few months in the spring and a few months in the fall, but a lot of the year you didn't want to be out in the river.
Although we're doing our best to sort of sometimes replicate Ohio's worst weather at times.
Just for a couple of days a year.
Yeah, right. I mean, or 10 days, totally traumatic, I mean, the weather here can be pretty fast. I think McAllister should do another piece on.
He's actually got a winter weather prep presentation that he's already knocked on my door and said, I want to give it. So yeah, Mr. Doom and Gloom.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We're gonna bring him.
Richard
I
McAllister.
don't mean that. Richard's great. We'll bring him back here to Riverside in the next.
He tells doom and gloom in a way though that makes you happy about it though. So that's the good news about this as well. With Schreiner, we were talking about this with Kiley right before you got here. That Schreiner's a liberal arts college, but you have kind of a champion in sciences in Dr. McCormick, who I kind of view as a Renaissance kind of person. He wants the sciences to be engaged. Where is the future of Schreiner's science program?
I think we have to accept that the future of all science is deeply connected with the liberal arts. We've got to have folks who understand that if they don't want to go out and learn and figure out all the new ways to learn, all the cutting edge concerns of not just the numbers that we look at in the data, but how people view those numbers, we're not gonna make any real progress in science. We need people who are learning how to learn, and that's what I love about teaching at a liberal arts school.
Yeah, right. And the students are coming. Are they? What do they? Are they know they want to do science, or do you find ones that didn't necessarily know yet?
It's a pretty good mix. A lot of them coming in. As with any school, a lot of people coming in who are interested in biology are 100% sure they're going to be a physician one day, and a lot of those decide over the years that that's not the right fit for them, and that's fine. But we do retain a lot of those folks in the sciences one way or another. Our field biology program is a great example of that. I was looking at the numbers the other day. Of all the people who've ever taken a class at the field station, I think we've had one transfer.
Wow.
It's a pretty strong.
It holds it.
It does. But of course, we got folks with all different interests. And Kiley was talking a little bit about majors and minors and how those can be so disparate sometimes. It's really wonderful.
Yeah. The role that the Riverside Nature Center plays in the work that you do, I mean, I know you're a kind of a champion for this facility. Why is this place important?
This is, I think, the hub for environmental literacy in our community.
Yeah.
It is just the place to come if you've got questions about nature, whether it's applied, like you want to really make your garden achieve a certain thing, or it's more observational. What are all these butterflies that I see in the park, or what are these things that are coming to my bird feeders? This is the place to come. It's a one-stop shop.
Right. When you have students or even people that you deal with, and you hear them come back to you and say, Dr. Distel, I saw this on TikTok. Is this really true? I mean, there's a lot of anti-science or nonsense out there. How do you help people, discern the facts from the gobbledygook that's out there?
Yeah, I'll echo what Kiley said and say evidence is the key. I mean, in science, that is our bread and butter. I like the idea that if a student sees something or anybody sees something on an online source, I encourage them to look at a breadth of sources. So do you see this on one niche source and nowhere else, or is this showing up a lot of different places with the same through line? That's a good kind of quick way to tell if there's some truth to the story.
Yeah, right. I just saw a great piece, by the way, that I sent to all my relatives. I'm one of those people that lays there and I'm like, oh, you're going to get this and you're going to get that, from the social media perspectives. But let's just say there's certain personalities out there that are trying to, the biggest one now is trying to dismiss the idea that we're going to space, and I saw an engineer discuss, well, if that person knew what the hell they were talking about, they would understand, the difference in building materials and how we get our spaceships into into space and why it is plausible. But there is this sort of anti-science movement. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's alarming, but I also think it's a great opportunity. You know,
Mhm.
people come in to college, but really in a lot of different arenas that I interact with folks, come in with ideas. Sometimes it's ideas they've had for a really long time. Sometimes I've had ideas for a really long time, like you were saying earlier, that turns out, well, maybe I didn't understand that the way I ought to have.
Yeah.
Or we've got some new evidence now that suggests that things have moved. You know,
Right.
I like the analogy of truth in my classes. We talk about the difference between truth and fact a lot, and it was true for almost all of human history that the world was flat,
Right.
because that's what everybody understood to be true. There's no evidence to the contrary.
Right.
But truth has shifted,
Right.
and truth does shift sometimes.
Although the Greeks apparently had a pretty good idea that it wasn't flat. You know, when you hear these things too, you're like, there's people out there that this is my geology story that I was telling Becky earlier. My theory is that the geologists knew that Darwin was probably right because they were seeing stuff. You know, they were understanding the world as far as time goes.
Yeah.
And when Darwin published, they're like, yeah, about time someone said something. At least you're going to take the fall for it, not us.
Yeah, right.
You know, I mean, and so Carl Sagan has that wonderful piece. You'll see it on social media every once in a while where talking about one of the Greek philosophers who figured out, you know, that the world wasn't flat, but that got lost at some point. But a lot of people, you know, we still have to deal with. I blame my colleagues in the media. Like, it's stuff that's so stupid that you have to sometimes pay attention to it because you're like, you really believe that? And then you give them some credence a little bit, and that's really hard to combat some of that stuff because we've seen the real, you know, we've seen those flat earthers, you know, try to do experiments and ultimately they always prove, yeah, the earth is round. That's
Right.
shocking, you know. So, do you ever have students that come to you like that? Do they say, oh, I heard this or I saw that?
Absolutely, I have students who come in and have perspectives that are based in speculation more than in evidence.
Mhm.
And most often, like I've been there. I was a kid. I was a young student too.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not so young folks, and that's okay too. Evidence is really the same deal. Like, hey, it sounds plausible. Let's look into it.
Yeah.
And so we go and look for some evidence. And if they're patient enough to look through the evidence, very often what we find is it doesn't add up.
Right.
But you know, sometimes we find that there's more evidence about one thing or another, and that's the compelling thing. It's the evidence. If I show you why it ought to be this way, then you can use that evidence to build a story that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're talking about Chris Distel, who's one of our esteemed professors over at Schreiner University. What's the future for STEM and science at Schreiner? How do you feel about things?
I think things are looking good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've got folks who are looking at a whole breadth of different topics. For example, if a student was interested in Schreiner and they wanted to study something to do with science, they weren't sure what, we've got so many opportunities.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think that Schreiner does best is undergraduate research. The sciences do it well, but really all the disciplines
Right.
do a terrific job. And if you haven't been in the past, I encourage everybody to come over in April for our Student Achievement Showcase, because that's really, it's free to the public and everybody gets to see all the great work that students have been doing in their respective fields. And sometimes you'll see a student who's presenting a poster on their work in chemistry, and then 2 hours later they're giving a talk on the trip they took to Eastern Europe,
Right.
and the cultural studies that they did there, because we're not silos.
Right. We talked about Kim Arviston. You keep him housed. What's his contribution like to the university?
Tremendous. Kim's work is tremendous.
And that's our segue, because we're going to talk about astronomy. I had not been to the telescope, and I didn't realize it was so. I didn't realize it was so beefy in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure Kim liked something larger, but it's still a pretty impressive facility.
It is an impressive facility.
And it is particularly the best when he's actually lecturing about what you're looking at with his sardonic sense of humor. So,
Yeah. But his passion really carries through too.
Exactly. And that brings us to our next guest. And Becky, you want to introduce our next guest?
Yeah, we have with us Bruce Barton. good friend and colleague with Kerr County Friends of the Night Sky, but also Bruce, president still?
No,
Okay.
past president.
Past president of the Hill Country Astronomers. Bruce and I have worked together for a number of years, and he was real integral in doing our kind of our science tech for our exhibit, our place
for
in
the
space.
place in
Yeah,
space,
yeah,
yeah.
he was our science advisor to make sure that we weren't,
Well, I was one of them.
one of them. Yeah, we weren't putting up a bunch of nonsense. So, so Bruce has helped us out a great deal. But yeah, I mean, again, talking about guests being invited today,
Yeah.
thought it was real important that we bring somebody in, to get us our feet off the ground, start looking, upwards. And
We were talking earlier, Bruce, that I thought that Lieutenant Commander Whitner was probably
Thank
one
you,
of the
Chris.
best. Thanks, Chris. Was probably one of the best speakers that I've seen out there. Her conversation was incredible.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, did you expect it to be that amazing? I mean, were you here for
In my
that?
experience, anytime you have anyone from NASA at all
Yeah.
come and speak, it's really eye-opening.
Yeah. Kerr County Friends of the Night Sky does what? What are you? Tell us the astronomy scene here in Kerr County.
Okay, well, to begin with, I want to emphasize that Kerr County Friends of the Night Sky is more than just about being able to gaze up at the night sky and be an astronomy freak. The thing about light pollution is that it is so insidious that you never see it coming until it's almost too late to do anything about it. And so what Kerr County Friends of the Night Sky is trying to do is foster an awareness that what we have here in Kerrville and the surrounding areas is special, and we do not want to see it ever become not special. Because in addition to being able to gaze upward and view the constellations and all the wonderful deep sky objects that are out there, we also want an awareness that light pollution affects more than our ability to see up. It affects our human psyche, it affects bird migrations, it affects all sorts of things that go on in our environment around us. And if we're not very, very careful, we can lose that very easily.
If you ever want a good example of how much light pollution's out there, I did some long exposure photography out at Lady Lodge earlier this summer, and I got to tell you, it was shocking. How much light leakage you could pick up
Yes.
for so many miles away.
Yes.
On the horizon. It's like, oh well, I guess that's San Antonio picking up there in the distance. And even in Lakey, even at Lady Lodge, there was a significant amount of light pollution out there as well.
Yeah.
Now, some people think it's their right to have like a searchlight in their front yard. So if I ever have that kind of pushback again from somebody on one of these public meetings, I'm just going to put a searchlight in my front yard and just aim it at people. Oh, I'm not trespassing. I'm not trespassing on your property.
Yeah, we run into that a lot.
Yeah.
Because here in Central Texas, there is a very strong sense of individuality and don't tread on my rights. Okay, and I get that. I mean, I have some of the same beliefs.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I don't think it's wise to do anything that I think is frankly stupid.
Yeah. Right.
So what we try to do at our Night Sky group, or Friends of the Night Sky group, is actually foster an awareness that outdoor lighting is not necessarily a bad idea. It's just that you need to do it in ways that are intelligent, that don't waste electricity. I mean, if you're using your searchlight example, if that searchlight is not serving a specific good purpose, then all you're doing is you're just wasting electricity.
Yeah. Right.
And that electricity has to come from somewhere. It's gonna require natural gas to generate it, or solar or nuclear power to generate it, and that is a resource that can be directed elsewhere more
Right.
intelligently. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to foster an awareness of the kinds of light fixtures that work, that do the purpose that you need them to do, but without doing it in a wasteful or obnoxious way.
Right. Talk about, or tell us a little about your interest in astronomy. How did you get started with it, and what level are you at now?
Well, okay, so I would consider myself kind of a semi-advanced amateur. I had been involved with it directly, hands-on, since about 1985. That's when I bought my first telescope during the height of the Halley's Comet craze.
Right.
And I've been involved with it ever since. I've been both vice president and president of 2 different astronomy clubs, one out in West Texas and one here. So currently I'm not even the immediate past president of Hill Country Astronomers, but I have witnessed it grow almost exponentially. It's kind of interesting. Hill Country Astronomers got started in 2011 with about, I want to say, 12 or 15 members. My good friend Mark Ward, who is a Lutheran pastor, had just moved to the area and had become acquainted with Jason Fry, who was a Methodist pastor there in Fredericksburg, where they both had, or in the area around Fredericksburg, where they both had parishes. And so they discovered that they had a mutual interest in astronomy, and so those two got together and said, well, let's just put it out an ad in a bunch of the area newspapers and see what we come up with. So they at the first meeting they had 12 or 15 members. Since then, we've gotten to about 100 members across, I want to say, about a 5 or 6 county area, if we don't count outliers like people who come in from Houston. Who have dual residence and that sort of thing. And so it's grown quite a bit, and so that tells me we have a lot of interest in it. Some people retire here basically so that they can have access to skies that are a lot better than what they would have in the Dallas-Fort Worth area or in the Houston area or in the Austin area.
I was always struck by the first time I drove Interstate 10 through West Texas at night. And I remember having to pull off the side of the road. I had told my wife, I said, I got to stop.
Yeah.
We got to stop and look at this. A camera came out, and it was like, this is incredible, And I didn't have a tripod with me at the time, but I just kind of laid the camera on the back and just aimed it up and clicked it, for a long exposure, because it was so dark. It was so incredible, and the sky was just so amazing.
A dark sky is an incredible resource. You don't want to trifle with it. You do want to protect it, but the problem is you don't know that you want to protect it until it's almost too late to do so.
Yeah, right. The world of astronomy, though, I mean, there's so many great resources out there now for people to use. There's apps. There's the great telescopes. How do people get involved? How do people get started and join the club, I guess?
That's pretty easy. We have a website, hillcountryastronomers.com.
Okay.
And that has contact info on the landing page there that tells you how to get involved with the club. We meet typically the first Monday of each month. Until recently, we were meeting at the Hill Country University Center in Fredericksburg.
Okay.
That facility has now changed hands. So it's no longer owned by Texas Tech, it's owned by the city of Fredericksburg. And so they evicted all of their tenants, which includes us. So we are now meeting at Zion Lutheran Church over on the other side of town, on the west side of town, first Monday of each month at 6:30.
In Fredericksburg.
In Fredericksburg, yes. And so that's just show up.
Yeah.
We have a wide range of expertise represented in that club. We have people who, like myself, have been involved with it for almost 40 years or even longer. And we have people that are just getting started because they moved out of here in the country and they want to become more acquainted with the night sky and they don't know how.
Right.
So everything in between. So even if you're an absolute rank novice, just come on out
and see what it's about. We try to have about a 1 hour session in the program that kind of covers different aspects of astronomy, and sooner or later you'll pick up some info that will be useful to you, and there will always be a plentiful source of advice and suggestions that are all very constructive because they come from people who are really passionate about it and are very eager to share that expertise that they have. I
think people, sometimes forget that astronomy is one of those things, those foundational, sciences where, if you go back and you look at the archaeological evidence, it's like so many of the archaeological pieces were around, celestial events or tracking the stars for timekeeping purposes or for navigational purposes. Are you fascinated by that history, or
I kind of am. What I found interesting is that a lot of the nomenclature that we use in the night sky, constellation names, star names, etc., are Arabic in origin. And the only thing that I can really attribute that to is that when you're out in the middle of the desert in first century AD, there's really not a whole lot to do except go out and look at the night sky and kind of name stars and sort of start tracking things and become more celestial aware. If you will.
But so much of the archaeology is so connected to the sky. It's like this is when the season starts, or this is when this is here, and those elements as well. Texas right now is kind of in the center of the future of space too. And what is that like for all the astronomy enthusiasts?
It is a wonderful time to be alive. Because we see all these things that are being accomplished in both ground-based and space-based astronomy. All you really have to do is say Hubble Space Telescope or James Webb Space Telescope, and looking at the things that those two instruments by themselves have accomplished in the last 20 years. Is just mind-boggling. But then there's so many other satellites that are more specific to different studies. We are currently being avalanched by data from a satellite that was specifically put up there to do nothing other than measure star positions. And those star positions are becoming so accurate now that it is possible for us to triangulate based on the tiny differences in their position in the night sky from when the Earth takes the satellites around the Earth take a star fix on one side of the sun, and then 6 months later we do it on the other side of the sun. That allows us to triangulate how far away we are from. It was a few hundred. It's now tens of thousands of stars in our neighborhood. And that then allows us to refine estimates on things that are farther away. And there's just a whole avalanche of data coming down from space now that just tells us so much more than what we even knew 10 years ago.
What's your favorite thing to kind of look at when you get up there and look at space? Looking through the telescope.
I'm kind of a nebulae guy. I like looking at gaseous nebula that are out there because they're so colorful. Now, in a telescope, you don't really see the colors because the way our eyes are constructed, you have the rods that sense black and white, and then you have the cones that sense color, and the rods are way more sensitive than the cones are. So when you're looking at an eyepiece in the telescope, you may look at an object like the Orion Nebula, and you see it silvery gray on black background, and it's stunning. But then when you take a picture of it, and do it in a color camera, or as I do with the black and white camera with color filters that I cycle in front of it to do red and then green and then blue and then mix them in the computer later, they are stunningly beautiful in color. And so that's one of the things that I kind of like to look at is nebula. So there's the Orion Nebula, Lagoon Nebula, the Trifid Nebula, most of them in the summertime sky,
Right.
in and around the Milky Way.
The one that always gets me is, and I can look at it through, I have a 600 millimeter lens for my camera, is just when we can see Jupiter. I love looking at Jupiter, because you can see some of the color in there.
Yep.
Like, wow, and all the moons are lined up,
And Saturn as well. I mean, when you get a look at the rings of Saturn for the first time, they're stunningly beautiful.
Right.
And it's kind of interesting now because Saturn is getting at its point in its orbit around the sun where the rings as seen from Earth are almost edge on. And so for the next couple of years, you'll see the rings almost disappear.
Oh, wow.
And then at some point they will disappear.
Yeah.
Because they're only about a kilometer or so thick.
Right.
And so from the distance that we're looking at Saturn, they will not be visible for a while.
Amazing.
But then they'll start opening up the other way and it'll become more and more visible.
Wow.
So it's just really cool to see it.
Very cool as well. Mike Morris is here too. He's the man in the hat over here in the corner. I'm going to move this camera a little bit closer to you.
Or I can move Lewis,
Yeah.
whichever you
Yeah,
prefer.
just move back, move it.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, grab that microphone. A lot of new landowners coming there, Mike, to the hill country. So you don't have to leave. You can stay with us if you want to join the conversation. Yeah, I'm not throwing you out yet. I generally tell people I throw them out.
When you're ready, just say,
Yeah.
get Bruce the old heave ho.
Mike, tell us a little bit about what you do with the Texas AgriLife Extension.
Well, AgriLife's role is historically, the Extension Service in general, is to take those advancements in agricultural science and technology and offer that to the agricultural producers in a given area. So since 1915, Texas has had an extension service, and the role is to go from the land grant university, take those technologies that are beneficial to producers and essentially do adult education.
Okay.
So that was the founding role.
Right. So the founding is like helping farmers or helping those people who are managing land resources with the best possible, here's the latest practices, here's something you might want to think about. Was that how that was developed then?
Yes, yes. And, through time, essentially the beginnings were productivity, profitability for a farmer or rancher. And today my title is Extension Agent for Agriculture and Natural Resources, as we acknowledge that agricultural production should take into account the natural resources that these land managers are in control of,
Right.
whether it's the soil or the native plants that exist or the wildlife.
What's your background in this area?
So my background is I grew up in a cattle raising family in East Texas, and got my degree in biology actually, and did internships with departments of conservation. But then I spent 30 years in commercial agriculture with some of the larger corporations. The last 15 years prior to becoming an agent, which I'm a relatively new agent, I worked for an international restaurant company and traveled around the world helping to vet production programs.
Okay. So a deep experience in the world of commercial agriculture, which if you've been around, I mean, I lived in Central Valley of California for several years, so you're around it the whole time, seeing large scale ag operations. But here in the hill country, it's a little bit more, it's not as large, but a little bit more refined. How do you help the landowners here?
Well, the focus here, I researched Kerr County when it became my destination, and the change here is the large landowners are slowly disappearing, and some of us certainly lament that fact. But we have more owners, smaller acreages. The good news is they tend to very strongly believe in stewardship. So, whereas in the past, and there's still some large ranchers that I consult with on range management and brush and noxious weed control. But more and more, there are smallholders who want to know what they can do to preserve the state of the land or improve it, because we have plenty of land that's degraded in Kerr County.
Right.
So working with them on reestablishing native species, working with them on promoting wildlife and creating habitat that's suitable.
Degraded from the overuse of the land, or from what would be the way?
In large part.
Yeah.
You know, ranching this country is a tough business, and it bred tough people.
Yeah.
But as markets squeeze some of them through the years, going back into the 30s and 40s and on, we had a lot of land that's been heavily overgrazed.
Yeah.
And once it's overgrazed, you start to lose soil.
Right.
And it's much harder to bring that land back to a more pristine condition. And certainly the encroachment of cedar has been a big issue.
And I've always heard that, you know, that the buffalo, you know, pre European contact, you know, they range down this far. Is that true, and that this was a much different looking place, you know?
Much different, and I think people would be startled. And I've spoken to a lot of folks who are relatively newcomers, and they don't understand that this was a short grass prairie, and the only place you would find cedar trees were on rocky ridges.
All right.
And the buffalo were the essential nutrient converters that pass through, graze it heavily, and leave it. And we frequently had fires.
Right.
And fire removed the cedar from the grasslands.
Right.
So people would be startled to see what the hill country looked like 100, 125 years ago.
How dangerous is cedar from a fire perspective?
Unless you've been on a prescribed burn where you catch a cedar, you probably can't appreciate it. Cedar in the right conditions of humidity can seemingly explode. It's startling. So, you know, the interesting thing is cedar, when it's properly hydrated and your humidity is not very low, can serve as a fire break.
Yeah.
It can actually stop a fire. But once it's in a condition for it to ignite, it's extremely dangerous.
Yeah. I feel like we kind of dodged a bullet, you know, like we were trending, you know, I would say we're still in perpetual drought, it seems like, but, you know, I remember a couple of years ago, we had a fire in Center Point where you saw crowning behavior in that cedar, and I'm like, oh man, there's so many of these houses like that have cedar touching their, you know, and I realized that humidity and moisture helps them, you know, but it just seems like we're playing with fire with all the cedar we have in the area.
Sure, that's absolutely true. And one of the programs offered through Hill Country Master Gardeners is called FireWise. So these new homeowners can learn, you know, how far back should they clear, what should they plant close to their house, and at least give you a chance if we ever had a wildfire type situation, which would be frightening.
So a landowner comes in and says, you know, how do I restore this habitat? How do you help them a little bit? Or do you see that quite a bit? I mean, is that what you mentioned that earlier? But
pretty frequently, yes.
Yeah.
So folks generally, the best way, I do a lot of phone consultation, but I tell them, frankly, the best way is to come out and take a look at your place.
Yeah.
And we can talk about what steps you can take. You know, essentially, we talk initially about the reduction of some of the more pestilent encroachment. You know, it could be some of the broadleaf weeds, or it can be cedar or mesquite, backrus willow. So we talk about reducing that because it's pulling nutrients from those plants you want to promote.
Right.
The tough part, because it involves some expense, is now if you have a good stand of native plants, creating conditions where they can expand themselves is always the best possible route. But we also talk about reseeding programs and the preferable native grasses and forbs, and trying to get those established or reestablished.
You talked about range management too, and so some of these places that still have the, the exotics, is there one exotic, hey, that's not, if you're going to have it, that's not bad. If you're going to have it, probably not a good idea. Do you have any kind of consultation on that?
Well, the first thing is to acknowledge that exotics are here to stay. In fact, it's probably become the #1 rural economic activity in Kerr County.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting business, and certainly interesting to drive in West Kerr County and see some of these species. The ones I would promote, if I had the option, would be those that are grazers, because we have a lot of unutilized grass in the county.
Yeah.
So our beef cattle numbers are much lower than they were historically. These new landowners love seeing the midgrass prairie, and it's beautiful, but those plants survive best when they're being utilized by a grazer.
Yeah.
So there are some of the exotic species that tend to eat grass as opposed to browsing, which our whitetails do, and we don't need to promote any more whitetails.
My God, they're all in my front yard, crapping all over the place. Ridiculous. I mean, the whitetail. It's pretty amazing how many whitetail we have in this area, and like how they even survive is amazing. They're not starving to death. I mean, they're pretty close. Seems like a lot of the time.
Sure.
But it's interesting, and the resiliency of the black buck and the axis. I mean, we have a neighborhood axis herd, probably close to 50 animals, I would think, at this point. And I thought they'd all died, during the winter storm, but they're there, they're hanging out.
The winter storm was tough on a lot of the exotics. The free rangers like the axis and the black buck that we see outside of the fences, they find a way to survive. It was extremely hard on black buck because this is just not their country.
Not exactly. What is the biggest misconception people have about their land when they come out?
I get 2 or 3 calls a month from new landowners who will tell me they just procured, and they're very proud of it, and rightfully so, 120 acres in the hill country, and they'd like to have stock on it. And they talk about procuring cattle or goats, and when you tell them the actual carrying capacity of that land, there's frequently silence on the other end of the line because it's very limited.
Yeah.
And I tell them, property rights being what they are, certainly you can stock as many, but what you'll end up with is overgrazing in a feedlot. You'll be paying a lot of money for feed.
Yeah.
So to properly utilize the grass, countywide, we're probably looking at an animal unit every 25 acres.
Right.
So where I'm from, it's every 5 acres.
Right.
So the misconception, you can see lush, beautiful grass at a distance, but these bunch grasses are relatively sparse when you walk through it. So that's where folks are kind of taken aback.
Right. Yeah, they don't realize the scale of it, the scale of that, or the requirements needed to service those animals. So.
But Mike, isn't the beauty though of having the opportunity to do wildlife management as your ag valuation? Therefore, these new landowners who come in and they want that gentleman farm or what have you, in their retirement,
Sure.
age, but they don't have to stock it for production. If they want a cow-calf operation, they can do that and still have their ag valuation, but if they're in the wildlife management.
Right, they have to establish, or there had been established an ag valuation, and you can convert it to wildlife.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the key is helping these folks understand what good stewardship looks like. Cattle are great for your land if it's at the correct stocking rate. They are nutrient converters.
Sure.
So, you know, one of the things that I typically, when I talk to some of these folks who have a substantial amount of grass, is there are still cattlemen in this county or surrounding counties, particularly in our drought situation, who are looking for a place where they can graze cattle for 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of income for the landowner, but it's tremendously advantageous for your land when it's correctly grazed.
Interesting. So many questions. Since you worked in the commercial agri industry, is there any agricultural product you don't touch? that's grown. I have mine. Mine's baby carrots. I live for a short time near a baby carrot factory, and the waste is disgusting. But
well, Lewis, look, the common saying about you don't want to see your sausage made.
Yeah, right.
It definitely applies here. The truth of the matter is, and I'll take this back to the situation we had where the popular media termed a co-product from meat manufacturers pink slime.
yeah,
And the fact is, you don't want to see it made, you don't really want to look at it, but it is safe, it is nutritious, and the fact is that the industry, whatever you think of it, is doing their level best to use every bit of that animal.
all right.
So, you know, I understand when folks say that does not appeal to me at all, certainly would to very few of us, but understanding the purpose and the benefit, that's where too many people get lost because that's not covered in the media.
Right.
And the fact is that just to throw out a quick statistic, because I went through this, you take away pink slime, this mechanically separated meat is what it is, and say we're not going to utilize it anymore. Well, you're going to have to increase the slaughter of cattle and hogs by about 10%. You're going to have to grow 10% more animals.
Yeah.
So let's think about what is efficiency is not a bad word.
Right.
In my,
Well, and then, you know, and I think people forget about that. You know, we require mass production because we like to have things that are, you know, inexpensive. Our pork chops or our steaks to be inexpensive, and that requires us to consume a lot of animals, and it's not always the most advantageous. I mean, I work down the street from one of the largest, you know, slaughterhouses in the country in Greeley, Colorado. And let me tell you, that place smelled terrible. But you know, you're like, well, I still like my steaks, so I'll deal with it. You know.
Sure. Well, and you know, the beauty of it is that the individual consumer has all kinds of options. If you want grass-fed beef, there's grass-fed beef. If you want steaks that are from a non-implanted animal, that's available.
Right.
So, but again, I always hope that there's some appreciation for the fact that, you know, we're the 5th largest cattle country in the world. There are 4 other countries that have more cattle. We by far produce the most beef because we're good at it.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Great stuff. Becky, we did it. We made it through the first ever Science Day. We together a lot of ground here today.
We did. Let's do it again.
Did you learn anything?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this is, you know, daily conversations that I have with these folks.
Yeah,
you know? So, learn. Mike is new to me. We've met, you know, through this program. So, glad to meet you.
Glad to meet you as well.
Yeah, and look forward to, you know.
And Mike, before we let you go, how do we find out more about what you do? And just go to the Texas AgriLife website.
We have a county website. It's Texas A&M AgriLife Kerr County Agriculture and Natural Resources, where I announce or we post adult education events.
Okay.
And our office is next to the Ag Barn, 3775 Memorial Highway, 27 Highway.
All right, very good. Becky, thanks so much for letting us do this.
Yeah, no, thank you, I appreciate it.
This is terrific.
It's great.
Tomorrow we are back over at Pint and Plow, and we'll continue. I think we're having Ingram ISD's PTO come on tomorrow. We'll have Doug Etzler from Gibson Discount Center, and we'll also have Janelle Peralt from JP Properties, and I believe we'll have Julie Davis from the Kerr Co Convention Visitors Bureau. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us.
Can I do one?
Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead.
Don't forget that this Saturday is our big annual, 10th annual Run for Riverside.
Oh, that's
5K
right.
is
5K.
Saturday, September the 14th at 8 o'clock. Still can register.
Okay.
So go online, riversidenaturecenter.org, and come out and support us.
All right. We'll make sure we get that I think it's in our newsletter. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us. We'll see you guys again tomorrow.
All right.
No holding back, no stepping stones, no broken promises, no busy tones. Just what it takes, just make believe. No one belongs.